My sister's baby shower was held at a luxury restaurant, but there was no seat for me. My sister said, "Why don't you try that dirty pub across the street?" My mom added, "It suits you perfectly." I smiled and said, "I'll do that," before quietly leaving. But when they saw me enter the pub, their faces turned pale. The invitation arrived 3 weeks before the event. Cream cardstock with gold lettering announced my sister Rebecca's baby shower at La Maison Dorée, the most exclusive restaurant in downtown Portland. 25 guests were expected to celebrate her third pregnancy. I held the expensive paper in my hands, running my thumb over the embossed script, and wondered if this would be different from every other family gathering in the past decade. It wouldn't be. Growing up, Rebecca had been the golden child. She married Travis Montgomery, whose family owned half the commercial real estate in the Pacific Northwest. They lived in a sprawling estate in the West Hills with their 2 children, 7-year-old Natalie and 4-year-old Lucas. Rebecca drove a white Range Rover, wore designer clothes exclusively, and had never worked a day in her life after college. Her social media presence showcased a perfect existence of charity galas, spa days, and European vacations. I took a different path. After graduating from Portland State, I opened a small bookstore in the Alberta Arts District called Chapter and Verse. The shop occupied a converted warehouse space with exposed brick walls and original hardwood floors. I specialized in rare books and first editions, catering to serious collectors and literary enthusiasts. The business operated on thin margins, but I loved every aspect of it. My apartment above the store was modest, furnished with secondhand finds and overflowing bookshelves. Our mother, Diane, had never forgiven me for choosing what she called a shopkeeper's life. She reminded me constantly that I could have married Gregory Ashford, the investment banker who pursued me during my senior year. Instead, I focused on building something of my own. My father, Thomas, passed away 6 years ago, taking with him the only family member who understood my choices. The morning of the baby shower arrived with typical Oregon drizzle. I dressed carefully in a navy wrap dress and pearl earrings, both purchased specifically for this occasion. The outfit cost more than I usually spent on clothes in 3 months, but I wanted to fit in. My dark hair was styled in loose waves, and I applied makeup with extra attention. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized the polished version of myself staring back. La Maison Dorée occupied the ground floor of a historic building downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Willamette River, and the interior featured crystal chandeliers, white marble floors, and tables draped in pristine linens. A valet took my aging Honda Civic with barely concealed disdain. I clutched the gift bag containing a hand-embroidered baby blanket I'd commissioned from a local artist, steeling myself before entering. The private dining room hummed with conversation and laughter. Women in designer dresses and expensive jewelry clustered around tables adorned with elaborate floral centerpieces. Pink and gold balloons created an archway over the gift table. Rebecca held court in the center, her pregnancy glow enhanced by professional makeup and a flowing silk maternity dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. My mother spotted me first. Diane wore a champagne-colored suit and had recently had work done on her face, leaving her expression perpetually surprised. She approached with quick steps, her smile tight. "You're late," she said, though I'd arrived exactly on time. "The traffic was heavier than expected," I replied, extending the gift bag. "Where should I put this?" Diane glanced at the simple craft paper bag with its handwritten tag. Her nose wrinkled slightly before she gestured vaguely toward the overflowing gift table. "Just find a spot somewhere." Rebecca turned as I approached, her eyes scanning my outfit with a practiced assessment she'd perfected over the years. "Oh, you came," she said, her tone suggesting my attendance was unexpected. "How sweet." "Congratulations," I said, leaning in for an awkward half-hug. "You look beautiful." "Thank you. Travis and I are thrilled about the baby. The sonogram suggests it's a boy, so Natalie and Lucas will finally have a little brother." She touched her rounded belly with one manicured hand. "We're thinking of naming him Preston, after Travis's grandfather." I smiled and nodded, recognizing the familiar pattern of Rebecca steering every conversation toward her perfect life. Other guests crowded around, offering their own congratulations and admiration. I stepped back, scanning the room for my designated seat. The tables were arranged in a horseshoe shape, each place setting marked with calligraphied name cards. I walked slowly around the perimeter, checking each card. Rebecca's mother-in-law sat at the head table. Diane occupied the seat beside her. Rebecca's college sorority sisters filled another table. Travis's female cousins claimed a third. I continued searching, my stomach gradually tightening. There was no card with my name. I completed the circuit twice, certain I must have missed it. 25 settings, 25 names, none of them mine. Heat crept up my neck as the realization settled. The invitation had been a formality. My presence wasn't actually wanted. Rebecca appeared at my elbow, her expression conveying false concern. Is something wrong? I can't find my seat, I said quietly, trying to keep my voice neutral. She glanced around the room with exaggerated confusion. Oh, I thought Monica mentioned this to you. We finalized the guest list weeks ago, and with the venue's capacity restrictions, we had to make some difficult choices. Family friends from Travis's side, you understand. People who've been part of our lives for years. The invitation had my name on it, I pointed out. Well, yes, but that was sent before we confirmed final numbers. Rebecca touched my arm with fake sympathy. I'm sure you understand how these things work. It's nothing personal. Diane materialized beside us, having sensed potential drama. Rebecca's right, dear. These events have such limited space. Perhaps you'd be more comfortable somewhere less formal anyway. The dismissal in her voice stung more than Rebecca's deliberate exclusion. I stood there, acutely aware of other guests glancing our way, their conversations pausing as they sensed the tension. Rebecca's eyes brightened with sudden inspiration, though I recognized the calculated cruelty beneath it. You know what? O'Sullivan's pub is right across the street. Why don't you try that dirty pub? They serve food, I think. Burgers and things. My mother actually laughed, a sharp sound that cut through the ambient noise. It suits you perfectly, actually. Much more your speed than La Maison Dorée. The comment landed exactly as intended. Around us, several women covered their mouths to hide smirks. Rebecca's mother-in-law raised her eyebrows in that particular way wealthy women have of expressing disdain without speaking. I felt my face flush, but something shifted inside me. The years of subtle insults, the constant comparisons, the endless stream of judgment about my choices coalesced into a moment of absolute clarity. I smiled, letting it reach my eyes. You know what? I'll do that. Rebecca blinked, surprised by my easy agreement. She'd expected tears or angry protests, something that would let her play the reasonable sister forced to manage my emotional outburst. My calm acceptance threw her off balance. Really? Diane frowned. You're just going to leave? You suggested it, I said pleasantly. O'Sullivan sounds perfect, actually. I hope you all enjoyed the shower. I turned and walked toward the exit, my head high, ignoring the whispers that followed. The gift bag remained on the table where I'd set it down, but I didn't retrieve it. Let Rebecca open that hand-embroidered blanket in front of her guests and explain why it came from her sister who wasn't important enough to warrant a seat. The drizzle had intensified to proper rain. I crossed the street, my heels clicking on the wet pavement, and pushed open the heavy wooden door of O'Sullivan's pub. The interior was everything La Maison Dorée wasn't. Dark wood paneling, brass fixtures, and the comfortable wear of an establishment that had occupied this space for decades. The scent of grilled food and aged whiskey filled the air. A handful of patrons occupied the bar, and a few tables held early lunch customers. Rain drummed against the windows overlooking the street. And there, in a corner booth, sat James O'Sullivan himself. He looked up from the paperwork spread before him, his green eyes meeting mine with immediate recognition. Well, if it isn't the book dealer who's been avoiding me for 3 months. I'd met James 6 months earlier when he came into chapter and verse looking for a first edition of John Steinbeck's East of Eden as a gift for his father's 70th birthday. I'd located a pristine 1952 copy through my network of collectors, and we'd spent an hour discussing literature, favorite authors, and the dying art of independent bookstores. He'd asked me to dinner. I declined, citing my policy of not mixing business with my personal life. He'd returned the following month, purchasing a signed Hemingway and asking again. I declined again. The third time, he bought a complete set of Tolkien first editions and didn't ask, just left his business card on my counter with "Call me when you're ready" written on the back. I never called. Now here he stood, looking unfairly handsome in dark jeans and a fitted sweater, his dark hair slightly damp from the rain. The paperwork on his table appeared to be architectural plans and permits. "James," I managed, suddenly aware that my mascara was probably running in the rain. "I didn't know you'd be here." "It's my pub," he said, gesturing around the space. "Has been for 5 years. Before that, it belonged to my father, and before that, my grandfather. We're coming up on our 70th anniversary, actually." The information reorganized my understanding of the situation. O'Sullivan's wasn't just some random bar Rebecca had used to insult me. It was a Portland institution, owned by the man I'd been carefully keeping at arm's length for half a year. I didn't realize, I said quietly. He stood, moving toward me with concern in his expression. What happened? You look like you've had a rough morning. The kindness in his voice nearly broke my carefully maintained composure. I glanced out the window toward La Maison Dorée, where I could see the elegant silhouettes of my family and their guests through the restaurant's massive windows. My sister's baby shower, I explained. Turns out I wasn't actually invited, just sent an invitation out of obligation. Rebecca suggested I try the dirty pub across the street instead. My mother agreed it suited me better than their fancy restaurant. James followed my gaze, his jaw tightening. They're in La Maison right now? I nodded. And they called my family's pub dirty? His voice had an edge I hadn't heard before. The restaurant that's been cited twice this year for health code violations? The one that waters down their wine and charges $50 for reheated chicken? I didn't know about the violations, I admitted. Most people don't. They're very good at maintaining their image. He studied my face for a moment. Are you okay? The simple question, asked with genuine concern, finally cracked my composure. Tears welled up before I could stop them. I'm so tired of being the family disappointment. I own a successful business. I support myself. I'm proud of what I've built. But to them, I'll always be the daughter who chose wrong. James pulled out a handkerchief, an old-fashioned gesture that somehow fit him perfectly. Your family doesn't deserve you. I dabbed at my eyes, probably making the mascara situation worse. Sorry. I'm a mess. You're perfect, he said simply. And I think it's time we showed your family exactly how dirty this pub really is. Something in his tone made me look up. What do you mean? James smiled, and it transformed his face from handsome to devastating. Do you trust me? I should have said no. I barely knew him beyond our brief interactions in my bookstore. But standing there in his family's pub, having just been humiliated by my own family, I found myself nodding. Good. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Bridget? It's James. I need you at the pub immediately. Bring the Cartier bag and that Dior dress we bought for the auction. Size 6, right? He glanced at me for confirmation. I nodded, surprised. Perfect. 20 minutes. The next call went to someone named Patrick. I need the private dining room prepared. Full service. The Waterford Crystal, the Wedgwood China, the works. And call Chef Bernard at his home. I don't care if it's his day off. Triple his usual rate. He made 6 more calls in rapid succession, each one mobilizing what sounded like a small army. I stood there watching, completely confused but also intrigued. What are you doing? I finally asked. Throwing you a proper celebration, James said. One that will be visible from every window in La Maison Dorée. Bridget arrived first, a whirlwind of efficiency carrying garment bags and shoeboxes. She turned out to be James's younger sister, a fashion buyer for Nordstrom with her mother's red hair and her brother's green eyes. 20 minutes, she announced. That's a new record even for me. Now, let's see what we're working with. She looked me over with a professional eye. Great bone structure. Excellent posture. We're going to make you absolutely stunning. She whisked me into the pub's private bathroom, which was surprisingly spacious and clean. The garment bag revealed a midnight blue cocktail dress, elegant and understated, with a designer label I recognized from Vogue. The shoes were Louboutins. The jewelry was simple but clearly expensive. How did you know my size? I asked as Bridget helped me out of my damp wrap dress. James pays attention, she said with a knowing smile. He mentioned once that you were probably a size 6 based on the way certain vintage dresses fit in your store. He's got a good eye for details. The information sent a warm flutter through my chest. While I'd been keeping my distance, James had been quietly noticing things about me. Bridget worked quickly, fixing my makeup and restyling my hair into an elegant updo. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. The dress hugged my figure perfectly, sophisticated and expensive in a way that made my earlier outfit look like a poor imitation of elegance. Now that's what I call an entrance, Bridget declared. When I emerged from the bathroom, the pub's private dining room had been transformed. The space, hidden behind what I'd assumed was just another wall, featured vaulted ceilings with exposed beams, original brick walls, and massive windows overlooking both the street and the river beyond. The table was set for 12 with crystal that caught the light and china that probably cost more per plate than my entire kitchenware collection. James had changed into a tailored suit that emphasized his broad shoulders and athletic build. He turned as I entered, and the expression on his face made my breath catch. You look incredible, he said softly. James, this is too much, I protested, gesturing at the elaborate setup. You don't have to do this. I'm not doing it because I have to, he said, moving closer. I'm doing it because I want to. Because you deserve to be celebrated, not dismissed. And maybe a little bit because I want to watch your family's faces when they see what they threw away. Through the windows, La Maison Dorée was visible across the street. I could see Rebecca's baby shower in full swing, the guests moving around the elegant space. They're going to see all of this? I asked. Every bit of it, James confirmed. Chef Bernard is preparing a 7-course tasting menu. I've invited some people I think you should meet. And we're going to have a spectacular afternoon that has nothing to do with your sister's baby shower and everything to do with showing Portland exactly what O'Sullivan's pub really is. The guests began arriving within the hour. I recognized several faces from Portland's business community. Margaret Reynolds, who owned the city's largest independent bookstore chain, arrived first. She'd been trying to buy Chapter and Verse for 2 years, making increasingly generous offers. Margaret, you know why I can't sell, I said as James introduced us properly. Actually, I'm not here to make an offer, Margaret said, accepting a glass of champagne. James told me about your inventory system and your approach to rare book authentication. I want to hire you as a consultant for my stores. 20 hours a month, your rate, plus expenses. I blinked, processing the offer. That's very generous. That's business, she corrected. You're the best in the Pacific Northwest at what you do. I'd be foolish not to work with you. David Chen arrived next, introduced as the owner of 3 successful restaurants in Portland, including the one that had just been nominated for a James Beard Award. James mentioned you're dealing with thin margins at your bookstore, he said directly. I've been looking for a retail space to open a coffee bar that caters to the literary crowd. Perhaps we could discuss a partnership? Your shop would get the coffee revenue, I'd get foot traffic from your customers. That could work, I said carefully, my business mind already calculating the possibilities. The guests kept coming. A commercial real estate developer interested in discussing a potential expansion space for Chapter and Verse. A wealthy collector who'd been searching for someone knowledgeable to help her acquire and catalog a private library. A journalist from Portland Monthly who wanted to write a feature on independent bookstores and had chosen mine as the centerpiece. By the time Chef Bernard's first course arrived, seared scallops with a champagne beurre blanc, I understood what James had orchestrated. This wasn't just a fancy meal to spite my family. He'd assembled some of Portland's most influential business people, all of whom had legitimate reasons to connect with me professionally. How did you arrange all this so quickly? I asked James between courses. I've been planning it for weeks, he admitted. I was going to invite you to a celebration dinner for the pub's anniversary. When you walked in this morning, upset and insulted by your family, I just accelerated the timeline. Why go through all this trouble? He set down his wine glass and looked at me directly. Because for 6 months, I've watched you deflect every compliment, dismiss every achievement, and treat your bookstore like it's somehow less important than what anyone else does. You act like you're lucky to exist in your family's shadow. But you're not in anyone's shadow. You're brilliant at what you do. You've built something real and valuable. And it's time you saw yourself the way everyone else sees you. His words settled over me like a warm blanket. Across the street, through O'Sullivan's massive windows, I could see the baby shower winding down. Rebecca stood near the windows of La Maison Dorée, her face pressed against the glass as she stared at our gathering. She could see everything. The designer dress I wore. The influential guests surrounding me. The elaborate meal being served on china that made La Maison's table settings look pedestrian. The easy laughter and genuine connections happening around the table. My phone buzzed with incoming texts. I ignored them through the 3rd course, a perfectly prepared beef tenderloin with truffle reduction. Between the 4th and 5th courses, I finally glanced at the screen. Rebecca had sent 15 messages, each one more frantic than the last. Who are all those people? Is that Margaret Reynolds from Reynolds Books? How do you know the O'Sullivans? Why didn't you tell me you had connections like this? Mom is asking questions. My mother had sent her own messages. We need to talk. Please call me. Rebecca is very upset. I turned my phone face down and refocused on the conversation happening around me. Margaret was discussing the possibility of hosting author events at Chapter and Verse. David Chen wanted to feature my store in his restaurant's monthly newsletter. The collector, whose name was Patricia Aldridge, described her vision for a private library that would require years of careful acquisition and thousands of hours of expertise. "I'd need someone I trust completely," Patricia said, looking directly at me. "Someone who understands not just the monetary value of books, but their literary and historical significance. Someone who approaches each acquisition as a curator would, not just a dealer." "That's definitely how I work," I confirmed, my mind already spinning with possibilities. "Then we should discuss terms. I'm prepared to offer a retainer that would give you financial stability while you continue running your store." She named a figure that would cover 3 months of my current income, monthly, for the next 3 years. I nearly choked on my wine. James caught my eye from across the table, a satisfied smile playing at his lips. He'd known exactly what he was doing, bringing these people together. By the time dessert arrived, a chocolate soufflé that Chef Bernard prepared individually for each guest, my phone had accumulated 47 text messages and 12 missed calls. Through the window, I watched Rebecca's baby shower conclude. Guests filed out of La Maison Dorée, several of them glancing across the street at O'Sullivan's with curious expressions. Rebecca emerged with Travis, my mother close behind them. They stood on the sidewalk, staring at the pub. Even from this distance, I could see the confusion and anger on their faces. Rebecca suddenly started across the street, her maternity dress flowing behind her, Travis and Diane hurrying to keep up. They burst through O'Sullivan's front door, their eyes immediately finding the entrance to the private dining room. James stood smoothly, moving to intercept them before they could enter. "I'm sorry, but this is a private event. Can I help you with something?" "That's my sister," Rebecca said, pointing at me through the doorway. "We need to speak with her." "Your sister is currently in a business meeting," James replied, his tone polite but firm. "If you'd like to make an appointment to see her, I'm sure she'll accommodate you when her schedule allows." Diane stepped forward, her face flushed. "Now you listen here, young man. I don't know who you think you are, but that's my daughter, and I have every right to speak with her. James O'Sullivan," he introduced himself, extending his hand. Neither Rebecca nor Diane took it. "And actually, your daughter is a guest in my establishment. She has every right to finish her meal and her meetings without interruption. Perhaps you should have considered that before suggesting she eat at what you called a dirty pub." Rebecca's face went pale. "She told you that?" "She did. Along with how you deliberately excluded her from your baby shower despite sending her an invitation. How you humiliated her in front of your guests." James's voice remained level, but steel ran through it. "Now, I'm going to ask you politely to leave. If you'd like to speak with your daughter or your sister, you can contact her through appropriate channels." Travis finally spoke up, his voice carrying the entitled edge of someone accustomed to getting his way. "Do you know who I am?" "Travis Montgomery," James said immediately. "Your family owns Montgomery Properties. You're currently being investigated by the city for several building code violations on your East Side development project. Your company's reputation has taken significant hits in the past year due to your tendency to cut corners. I know exactly who you are." The color drained from Travis's face. "That's not public information." "It will be. Portland Monthly is running a feature next month." James gestured toward the journalist sitting at our table, who raised her glass in acknowledgement. "Now, are we done here?" Diane's voice shook with anger. "This is absurd. She's family." "Then you should have treated her like family," James said simply. "Good afternoon." He held the door open, making it clear they were expected to leave. Rebecca looked past him, her eyes finding mine. For just a moment, I saw something that might have been genuine distress cross her face. "Can we please talk?" she called out. I stood, aware that everyone at the table had fallen silent. Walking to the doorway, I looked at my sister, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time in years. She was beautiful, successful, and surrounded by everything our mother had taught us to value. She was also deeply unhappy, though she'd never admit it. "You had 3 weeks to talk to me," I said quietly. 3 weeks between sending that invitation and today. You could have called to tell me about the seating situation. You could have been honest. Instead, you chose to humiliate me in front of your friends. You suggested I eat at this pub because you thought it would shame me. Because you wanted everyone to see that I don't belong in your world. "That's not what I meant," Rebecca protested weakly. "It's exactly what you meant. And here's what you don't understand, Rebecca. I don't want to belong in your world. I never did. I built my own world, one where I'm respected for my knowledge and my integrity. One where people value what I do because it matters, not because of who my husband is or how much money I spend." Diane interjected, "You're being incredibly ungrateful. We included you in the invitation. We tried to make you part of the celebration." "No, you didn't. You sent an obligation invitation and hoped I wouldn't come. When I did show up, you saw it as an opportunity to remind me of my place. Well, I know my place now, and it's not with people who treat me like an embarrassment. So what, you're just going to cut us off? Rebecca's voice rose. We're your family. Family doesn't treat each other the way you've treated me. Family doesn't spend years making someone feel worthless because they made different choices. Family doesn't mock someone's livelihood and then get upset when there are consequences. I stepped back into the dining room. James, would you please show them out? I have business to attend to. He did exactly that, closing the door firmly behind them. Through the window, I watched my mother, sister, and brother-in-law stand on the sidewalk, arguing among themselves. Finally, they climbed into Rebecca's Range Rover and drove away. When I returned to the table, the other guests applauded softly. Patricia Aldridge raised her glass. To finding your place, wherever that may be. To finding your place, everyone echoed. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of meaningful conversations, exchanged business cards, and concrete plans for future collaborations. By the time the last guest departed, the sun was setting over the Willamette River, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. James and I stood at the window, watching the light fade. The private dining room felt enormous now that everyone had gone. Thank you, I said finally. For all of this. For defending me. For believing I was worth this effort. You're worth considerably more effort than this, James replied. I would have done much more if you'd let me. I turned to face him. Why? You barely know me. We've had maybe a dozen conversations. Quality over quantity, he said with a slight smile. Those dozen conversations told me everything I needed to know. You're intelligent, passionate about your work, and kind to everyone who walks into your store. You remember details about people's reading preferences. You get excited about finding the perfect book for someone. You treat rare first editions with the reverence they deserve. And you built something meaningful from nothing, which takes courage most people never find. I kept turning you down, I pointed out. You did. And I respected that, even though I disagreed with your reasoning. You weren't ready, or you didn't trust me, or you had other priorities. Whatever the reason, I was willing to wait. What if I'd never been ready? He shrugged. Then I'd have settled for being the guy who occasionally bought overpriced first editions from the bookstore owner he admired from afar. But I'm glad you walked through my door today, even if the circumstances were unfortunate. I looked at this man who'd orchestrated an entire afternoon to help me see my own worth. Who'd defended me against my family without being asked. Who'd spent months patiently waiting while I kept him at arm's length. I'd like to have dinner with you, I said. Properly. Not as a business meeting or a revenge plot against my family. Just dinner. James's smile transformed his entire face. I'd like that very much. Though I should warn you, now that I've made my move, I intend to be fairly persistent about convincing you I'm worth keeping around. I think you've made a pretty compelling case already. He reached for my hand, his fingers warm against mine. Good. Because I've got a lot more to show you. We stood there as evening settled over Portland, the pub's lights reflecting off the wet streets below. Across the way, La Maison Dorée had closed for the afternoon, its windows dark. Tomorrow, the gossip would start spreading. People would ask questions about what happened at Rebecca's baby shower, about the mysterious gathering at O'Sullivan's pub, about the bookstore owner who turned out to have connections to some of Portland's most influential business people. My phone continued buzzing with messages I didn't bother to read. Eventually, I'd need to deal with my family. There would be conversations, probably uncomfortable ones. Rebecca would demand explanations. Diane would try to smooth things over while making it clear she still thought I'd overreacted. Travis would attempt to leverage his business connections to punish me somehow, though he'd find that harder than expected now that I had my own network of support. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, I stood in a beautiful room with a man who saw me clearly and liked what he saw. I'd spent so long believing my family's narrative about my choices that I'd forgotten to write my own story. Now, surrounded by evidence of what I'd actually built and who I'd actually become, I could see the truth. I wasn't the family disappointment. I was the one who got away. James squeezed my hand gently. What are you thinking about? How sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes, I said. How being excluded from that baby shower might have been the best thing that could have happened. I'd agree, except I'm obviously biased. He grinned. Come on, let me walk you back to your car. Tomorrow, I'll take you to breakfast and we can discuss that dinner I'm hoping you'll agree to. I already agreed to dinner, I reminded him. I know. But I'm greedy. I want breakfast too. And lunch. And probably every other meal you're willing to share. I laughed, the sound feeling foreign after the emotional weight of the day. You're very sure of yourself. I'm sure of you, he corrected. I'm just hoping you'll give me a chance to prove I'm worth your time. We walked through the now quiet pub, James turning off lights as we went. My Honda Civic sat alone in the parking area, looking distinctly out of place next to James's sleek Audi. I'll follow you home, he offered. Make sure you get there safely. That's not necessary, I started to protest, but he shook his head. Humor me. It's been a difficult day, and I want to make sure you're okay. Something about his genuine concern touched me deeply. I'd spent so long being strong and independent that I'd forgotten how good it felt to let someone care. Okay, I agreed. The drive back to my bookstore took 20 minutes through rain-slicked streets. James's headlights stayed steady behind me the whole way, a reassuring presence. When I pulled into the alley behind chapter and verse, he parked behind me and walked me to the door. Thank you again, I said, key in hand. For everything. The pleasure was entirely mine, James replied. He hesitated, then leaned down and pressed a kiss to my cheek. Get some rest. I'll see you tomorrow. I watched him drive away, then climbed the stairs to my apartment. The space felt different somehow, warmer and more welcoming than it had this morning. I changed out of Bridget's beautiful dress, which James insisted I keep, and into comfortable clothes, then made myself a cup of tea. My phone showed 63 unread messages. I scrolled through them briefly. Rebecca's messages had shifted from confused to angry to pleading. Diane's followed a similar pattern. There were also messages from relatives I barely spoke to, all asking variations of the same questions. I turned off my phone and carried my tea to the window seat overlooking the street. Rain continued to fall, creating a soothing rhythm against the glass. 6 months ago, James O'Sullivan had walked into my bookstore looking for a first edition Steinbeck. I'd found him the book and built a wall between us, convinced that keeping my business and personal life separate was the smart choice. Looking back now, I could see I'd been protecting myself from potential hurt by pushing away anything that might matter. My family had taught me well. Rebecca's constant superiority, Diane's endless disappointment, the years of being told my choices were wrong, all of it had convinced me I was somehow less than. I'd internalized their criticisms until I believed them myself. This afternoon had shattered that belief. Watching Margaret Reynolds discuss her admiration for my work, listening to Patricia Aldridge describe me as one of the most knowledgeable dealers she'd encountered, seeing David Chen's enthusiasm for partnering with my store, it had forced me to confront the disconnect between how I saw myself and how others saw me. James had orchestrated it all, not to humiliate my family but to show me my own worth. I thought about Rebecca standing on the sidewalk outside O'Sullivan's, confusion and anger written across her face. For years, she'd maintained her position as the successful sister, the one who'd made all the right choices. Today had disrupted that narrative. She'd seen me in designer clothes, surrounded by influential people, conducting business with Portland's elite. Everything she'd used to define her superiority had been revealed as superficial. Part of me felt guilty for enjoying her discomfort. But a larger part felt liberated. The next morning arrived with weak sunlight breaking through the clouds. I opened chapter and verse at 9, going through my usual routine of checking inventory and preparing for the day's customers. The familiar smell of old books and polished wood brought comfort after yesterday's emotional turbulence. I was cataloging a new shipment of vintage mysteries when my email chimed with 3 new messages. The first was from Margaret Reynolds, confirming our consulting arrangement and requesting my availability for next week. The second came from Patricia Aldridge, with a formal contract attached for the library curator position. The third was from David Chen, proposing specific terms for the coffee bar partnership, including profit-sharing percentages that were more generous than I'd expected. I read through each message twice, making sure I wasn't misunderstanding. These weren't vague promises made over champagne. These were concrete business offers with real terms and actual timelines. Within 24 hours of being humiliated by my family, I'd received 3 opportunities that would fundamentally change my financial situation and professional standing. My phone rang. Rebecca's name appeared on the screen. I let it go to voicemail, not ready for that conversation yet. She called again immediately. Then Diane called. Then Rebecca again. I silenced my phone and returned to the contracts, taking notes on terms I wanted to negotiate and questions I needed answered. The shop's bell chimed as my first customer of the day entered. Mrs. Patterson, a retired English teacher who came in every Thursday looking for classic literature to add to her collection. We spent 40 minutes discussing the merits of various Bronte editions before she selected a beautiful copy of Wuthering Heights with original illustrations. As I wrapped her purchase, she mentioned seeing my photo on social media from yesterday's gathering at O'Sullivan's. My niece works at Portland Monthly, she explained. She was very impressed with you. Said you were the most knowledgeable person in the room about literary history. Word was already spreading. In a city like Portland, where the professional community was surprisingly interconnected, news of yesterday's events would reach everyone who mattered within days. My family's attempt to diminish me had instead elevated my profile. At precisely 10 o'clock, James walked through the door carrying 2 coffee cups and a bag from the bakery down the street. "Good morning," he said, his smile warm and genuine. "I brought breakfast. Hope you like croissants." I accepted the coffee gratefully, the rich aroma filling the space between us. "You didn't have to do this." "I wanted to," he said simply, setting the bag on my counter. "Besides, I promised you breakfast, remember?" "I remember." I took a sip of the coffee, perfectly prepared with just the right amount of cream. "You pay attention to details." "When it matters, yes." He leaned against the counter, looking completely at ease among my shelves of books. "How are you feeling today?" "Surprisingly good," I admitted. "I've already received 3 formal business proposals this morning. Real contracts, not just polite promises." "That's because they recognize quality when they see it." His expression grew more serious. "Have you heard from your family?" "Multiple calls. I haven't answered yet." James nodded understanding. "Take your time. They don't deserve immediate access to you after what they did." We stood there in comfortable silence, sipping our coffee as morning light filtered through the bookstore windows. Outside, Portland was waking up, people hurrying past with umbrellas and briefcases. Inside chapter and verse, surrounded by stories written by others, I was finally ready to write my own. "About that dinner," I said, meeting James's eyes. "When were you thinking?" His smile could have lit up the entire store. "How about tonight? Unless that's too soon." "Tonight sounds perfect." And it was.